We're excited to have y'all all here. We're going to be doing this quick training just to prepare for Advocacy Day 2025 coming up on February 27th. And we are excited to gear up. It's going to be a challenging session, but we are definitely we're ready to have everyone there, get people activated, um, and take on this session. I will get us started. There we go. I'm going to turn this off just since I'll be looking over here. So today's training is going to cover just information on the legislative process, guides for communicating with your legislator, what to expect on Advocacy Day on February 27th, and then we'll touch on some talking points just generally for gun violence prevention advocacy work, some terminology that we use and what terminology we try to avoid using. And then we'll hit on Texas Gun Sense's legislative priorities and some of the bills that we're keeping an eye out on as we get towards the end. So the broad overview, looking at the Texas legislature, the Texas Senate has 31 members elected every 2 years, and it's overseen by the lieutenant governor. And the Texas House of Representatives is 150 members elected every 2 years, led by the Speaker of the House. Um, the legislative session for both houses lasts 140 days, convenes every 2 years, and this is when constituent feedback is most important, and we really try to do the most work in our legislative advocacy. As we look to things that are bound to happen on most session years, there is always the chance that there'll be a special session. Those are 30 days long. In Texas, there's no advance notice required, and Governor Abbott can call those at any point. Looking at specifically in the Senate and the House, in the Senate right now, it looks like most gun bills are referred to the State Affairs Committee, and bills in the House are typically referred to the Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee. So that's typically where we'll show up to the hearings and where most of our things will get decided on whether or not they're going to ever get past committee. So how a bill becomes a law in Texas, just drafting an introduction is when the legislators write the bills, introduce it in the House or the Senate. That goes to the committee review. The committee gets to study it, hold public hearings, listen to public feedback, and can suggest changes at that time. It goes to debate and vote in the first chamber once it gets past committee into the House or Senate. If it passes, it moves on to the opposite chamber. Once it gets past the second chamber, if it does, it gets to if the second chamber does not agree but wants to work on getting the bill passed, they go to conference committee. And if the two chambers disagree on changes, the committee will work until they get an agreed upon version or until the session expires. Both chambers must approve it, and then after that, it goes to the governor. At that point, Governor Abbott has the chance to sign the bill into law, veto it, or do nothing. And in Texas, after a certain period of time, the law, if passed by both chambers, can become law after a set period without the governor's official approval. And with each bill, once it's passed by the chambers and gets the governor's signature, it will have a specific date that it's going to go into effect. And that is when we'll feel the effects of these gun bills in particular. And so as we gear up for Advocacy Day, we're going to talk about the details of Advocacy Day specifically in just a few minutes. But one of the things we want to touch on is communicating with your legislators and what that looks like, especially in a state that's not always friendly to gun violence prevention advocates. And I see a question in the chat. The slides will be shared. We'll also be sending out our advocacy toolkit to everyone on this call as well. So communicating with your legislators, calling and emailing are some of the most effective ways to make your voice heard. Some people want more of a personal connection and to be able to be face to face with their lawmaker. And so you're, as a constituent, you're always welcome to request in-person meetings to try to establish a relationship and get more time with them. You're also welcome to stop by their office at any point in the Capitol, talk to their staffers, try to build some rapport there. It's always, it's good if you're in Austin in particular to build those relationships and try to get to know the staffers because they are some of the people that will help you get on good terms with those legislators. In all communications with legislative offices, particularly when you are calling in, make sure you're including your full name, your contact information, and your full address to make sure that they're logging your comments. There are always times that they won't log your comments or someone forgets to put their name down, and so they don't know really who to attribute that feedback from and if they're actually a constituent of that specific district. And when you're calling in, try to reference specific bills and state clearly whether you support or oppose them. Texas Gun Sense will push out, and we'll talk about a few of them in a few minutes, but we'll post on social media and send to our lists some bills that we're in support or in opposition to. Other groups in gun violence prevention advocacy and in other forms of advocacy will also post those bills. And so follow your trustworthy policy groups and make sure that you're in the know as they're pushing out their legislative updates this session as we move through it. And don't forget, your lawmakers work for you and they should listen to their constituents' concerns. And this QR code looks like it has been broken. And so I'm going to post that in the chat afterwards, but it's a link that'll show you, if you aren't aware, who your congressperson is, who your state house and senate people are, and also I think it gets down to the lower level as well. So as we're looking to Advocacy Day in 2025. It's coming up on Thursday, February 27th. Last year, we saw or in 2023, we saw hundreds of Texans come together at the Capitol to demand common sense gun laws. And now it's time again, as this new session has come around, for us to show up with as many people as we can to show our support for gun violence prevention work, to reach out to our allies in the legislature, and to really show strong constituent support for gun violence prevention for those legislators who are not necessarily on our side. So generally what to expect at 9 a.m. If you is when check-in starts at United Methodist Church beside the Capitol. There will be a quick optional training led by our partners at Texas Impact. They're part of the Texas Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. Following that, we'll move over to the south steps of the Capitol and hear from speakers. Our executive director, Nicole Golden, will be speaking there. We've got people from the national gun violence groups and a bunch of local partners as well that will have their speakers there and make sure that we hear from survivors and advocates and everybody to really make sure voices are heard at the Capitol. After that, you have the opportunity to grab lunch and join volunteer leaders in legislative meetings. We'll also have interactive art displays in specific rooms at the Capitol that will be announced closer to time. And if you wish to go with volunteer leaders to the legislative meetings, we will make sure that, especially for new people who have not been to advocacy days before, that you're with a seasoned volunteer who has done this, who has met with legislators, and you'll have the opportunity to come in and just share some of your feedback. If you want to go to see your legislator, you can have more of an in-depth meeting if they're available. But we'll also have very small opportunities like dropping by pamphlets and one-pagers to make sure that they know your points and that you don't have to, sit there and have a full meeting with folks. You can just drop by that information, leave your name in the log, and make sure they know your stance. And so when you go in to talk to some of these legislators, we want to make sure that we are using the right language and that we're really using compelling data points. So most Texans support common sense gun laws. Most people on this call would agree with that. We've got 90% of Texans, including gun owners, that support stronger background checks. 76% of voters support raising the legal age to purchase any firearm from 18 to 21, which would match Texas's handgun requirements. And 74% of Texans support extreme risk protection orders to temporarily remove those firearms from individuals posing a danger to themselves or others. Um, we um, also want to emphasize that gun violence is personal, that it's the leading cause of death for children and teens in Texas, and that domestic violence firearm homicides have nearly doubled in Texas since 2013, with more victims killed by guns in 2023 than all other means combined. We need to make sure that, especially as a lot of these bills are pushed to arm teachers and really make our communities more dangerous, not safer, that we push our data-backed and science-backed arguments to show that we want safer communities through these policy priorities. Um, as we look towards specific causes to some of these, gun deaths have risen 63% under Greg Abbott as gun laws have been weakened. In 2022, 2,644 gun deaths were suicides, and we have the highest number of unintentional shooting incidents on average that compared to other states. And since 1994, federal background checks have blocked over 4 million gun sales to prohibited purchases. And the states requiring background checks for all gun sales do see 10% lower homicide rates. One of the most important things when you're talking to legislators, when you're talking to their staffers, is to be sure to share any personal stories that you have or that you've heard of and that have you really connected to emphasize the human impact of gun laws. There, of course, with certain legislators, there's only going to be so much we can do to pull them to our side to try to see that human impact. But if you talk about the reason that you've been pulled into this movement and that you're trying to come to the Capitol to advocate, um, it often will have a bigger impact on those legislators. And so gun violence terminology, we have a few additional words and phrases that will be on the legislative advocacy toolkit that we'll send out after this call. Um, but I'm going to run through these just because it's really important as language has evolved that we are using the right language that's not too inflammatory when we're talking to folks who are often on the other side of the aisle on this issue. So one thing that we say is gun reform or gun safety or gun violence prevention. We try to avoid saying gun control. It reframes the focus on saving lives rather than restricting gun ownership or controlling people's rights. And it keeps us away from the argument that folks still get pulled into about, well, you want to take away my Second Amendment right and things like that. And so we really want to talk about making our community safer, preventing gun violence. We're not trying to control anyone's rights or take anyone's guns away. Um, Another thing that we say is background checks on all gun sales. That we say instead of universal background checks. Background checks on all gun sales is more clear. It helps people understand a little bit more than kind of a vague term like universal does. And so universal, a lot of people see that to mean mandates, and wording it like background checks on all gun sales helps people understand that private sales would just require the same background check as a federally licensed dealer. And so just standardizing the background checks should be required at all levels from all dealers, and that there shouldn't be no loopholes on that matter. We also want to avoid using words like ban. And so when it comes to semi-automatic rifles, we don't want to say ban semi-automatic rifles. We want to focus on raising the age of purchase for semi-automatic rifles. Um, People feel differently on this. Some people want to advocate for fully banning semi-automatic rifles. Our stance at Texas Gun Sense is that no matter what your views are, a ban is unlikely to pass in Texas, but we can make progress towards raising the age to 21 to purchase semi-automatic rifles and reduce gun violence and gun deaths in that in the path towards that. Um, as you heard, I said semi-automatic rifle. We do use that instead of assault rifle. This is how the weapons are recognized by the ATF, and it's how it's categorized in most legislation. So we want to make sure that we're using the proper names for the weapons that we're referring to. And another thing, and this goes for any issue, not just gun violence prevention, you want to make sure that you're not saying all Texans or all people or everyone, every Texan support this. You want to say the majority of Texans, or give, if you have your fact sheet, the specific percentage, if you know that data point, of Texans support gun safety legislation or whatever specific type of gun violence prevention measure you're referring to. It's pretty, I've been in meetings and I know a lot of my colleagues have as well, where you lose credibility and the folks that are not on our side on this issue will just shut down and not want to engage with you further when you say that every Texan supports this or all Texans support this. And they'll pull the small but very vocal minority of their constituents that do support their stance on it um, as an argument against your point. And on that note, we also want to say gun extremist, or say gun extremists, not gun nuts or crazy gun people, or use inflammatory language like that. Gun extremists and the folks that do show up to also to stand against the things that we advocate for. They're a small vocal minority and they don't represent the bulk of gun owners. It's best to just call them out as dangerous and say that they're, making our communities less safe rather than using inflammatory language that will just rile them up. It'll rile the opposition up. And it really makes things more volatile at the Capitol. It makes things more volatile when we're at rallies or anything else. And another thing that we want to say specifically is died by suicide with a firearm when we're talking about suicide, rather than committed suicide with a firearm. We want to use neutral language that helps to decrease the stigma associated with suicide and with mental health. A lot of folks across the aisle will consistently point at mental health and say, we need to fund this, we need to fund that. We want to keep the inflammatory language away. We want to make sure that we're not stigmatizing suicide or mental health and that we're not painting it to be a criminal or immoral act. And there's a few more, as I mentioned, a few more examples of this terminology in the legislative advocacy toolkit that we will send out after this call that really hones in on a few more words and phrases that we try to use when we're communicating with legislators in particular. And so as we are looking at the 89th Texas legislature this year, Texas Gun Sense has a number of legislative priorities related to gun violence prevention measures. We've really narrowed it down to 3 things for this session that we're trying to focus on. So number 1 is expand secure gun storage laws. As you all know, firearms are the leading cause of death for children and teens in the US and in Texas. And TGS believes that at minimum, Texas should improve its child access prevention law to deter adults from making firearms accessible to youth under 18. The second thing that we're really trying to push for this session is raise the age bills to purchase semi-automatic rifles. So we support the families in Uvalde that are pushing for legislation to raise the age from 18 to 21 to purchase semi-automatic rifles, like the AR-15. As I mentioned earlier, this would match the law that in Texas for handguns. And so we think that it's a pretty common sense gun violence prevention effort and are really hoping that we make some more progress with it this session. The third thing is defend against rollbacks. This is something that we have always worked on, that we will always have to work on, and that most of the gun violence prevention groups are super familiar with. we are, one of our main priorities is just defending against legislation that expands guns in our schools and in other places, and that loosens restrictions that keep our community safe. There's constantly bills that want to reduce those restrictions that have been put in place. And we know that that's obviously not that's not the goal. That's not going to make our community safer. And so we're going to continue to stand against those. And so specifically, with the 89th Texas Ledge, we're starting to look at a few bills. So I've put in white the bills that we're following that are good bills. So we've got HB 1556, that's relating to prohibiting the transfer of certain semi-automatic rifles to certain recipients, creating a criminal offense and increasing a criminal penalty. HB 528 relates to requiring public schools to provide certain parents notice regarding certain incidents and risks related to the parent's, child, and suicide prevention materials. And HB 6410 is, I don't think it's been filed yet, but it is on its way. And it's a child access prevention bill to make sure that we are strengthening our safe storage efforts. Some of the bad bills that we're focused on, to name just four of them right now. HB 162 would prohibit state and local governments from recognizing extreme risk protection orders. And so it's trying to take some of that power away to for local governments in particular to be able to just keep their communities safe. HB 259 would remove short-barreled rifles and shotguns from Texas's list of prohibited weapons. SB 83 would allow firearms on school property. That's something that we have fought against and will continue to fight against to make sure that teachers aren't armed and that guns are not allowed on school grounds. And HB 1337 is pretty awful. It would recognize out-of-state carry licenses universally, further expanding who can carry firearms in Texas with minimal oversight. Open carry licenses are um, already carry their own dangerous weight, and recognizing out-of-state licenses would definitely increase incidences of gun violence rather than our goal of decreasing that. And so I'm going to open it up for questions here in a few minutes. I do want to highlight as we are approaching Advocacy Day and moving past that on coming up on February 27th. Um, we've got two programs that we are getting off the ground, and then general TGS efforts just to keep you informed. So Texas Healthcare Partners for Gun Sense is our program that's a healthcare coalition trying to really activate healthcare professionals with resources and information to come to the Capitol to advocate, to put on their white coats uh, and represent their field as experts on gun violence prevention efforts as a public health crisis. So if you're a healthcare professional, if you have friends that are in the healthcare industry, please pass the info along. We've got that link right there, and I'll drop that in the chat as well. Um, and then for TGS Rising Leaders, this is our program that's trying to give leadership opportunities in the gun violence prevention movement to young folks under the age of 25, and really just helping folks make a bigger impact, building the skills for future roles, getting the resources that they need to grow their impact in their community. So if you know any young folks, any college students, please send that their way. Again, I'll post that link in just a second. And then if you aren't part of the TGS email list already, and if that's not how you heard about this event, please scan that QR code and join our email list. And it's also at texasgunsense.org. We'll have that on there. And together we can end gun violence in Texas. I'm going to stop sharing that. Turn this back on. I know I'm going to pop into the chat. I think that Nicole was answering a lot of the questions. If anyone has any questions specifically about Advocacy Day or about the legislative cycle coming up, and what we're expecting, go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute.
Okay, so quick question on one of the talking points you said, the extreme risk protection order. Where does the law stand in Texas on that right now?
I'm going to, Nicole, would you mind? No.
No, not at all. I mean, extreme risk protection orders are also called red flag laws, and so that might be a more familiar term
Mhm.
that you have heard, but Texas doesn't have one at all. And we have pushed for them unsuccessfully just because of the political climate's challenges. So we don't have one, and probably will down the road when things get better, and we'll return to working on that. As Garrett also mentioned, there's a bill. I'm losing the number now, but he mentioned it in his list. HB 162 would seek to forever prohibit the passage of an extreme risk protection order in Texas, which is ridiculous. I don't know its real chances of passing or even being able to legally do that, but we're mostly on the defense game when it comes to extreme risk protection orders this session. So to answer your question, Jordan, we just don't have one in Texas right now. About 20 something states maybe do, somewhere around, give or take 20-ish, 25.
Okay. I mean, I assumed that we didn't, but I also was wondering, I guess what you're saying is like that's not as feasible as other things for this session. That's more of a longer game strategy. Um, but okay, that's helpful. And then I guess the defensive on 180, 162. That's really bad. Thank you all.
I didn't see who was next. We'll go to Robin. If you're talking, Robin, we can't hear you. If you want to pop that question in the chat, if you want, I'm gonna hop over to Kim. I think you have your hand up.
Hi. Go ahead. Is it gonna be a march?
Will there be a march on Legislative Day or any kind of rally, he's wondering?
So we'll have on the south steps of the Capitol. I think it should be. Stay tuned and definitely sign up. I'll get that Advocacy Day link here in just a second for y'all. I think around 11 a.m. is when we're going to hear from speakers in the south steps. So we'll definitely have kind of the speakers and a rally there. I don't believe we'll be doing a march this time around. Is that right, Nicole?
We'll march to get from the church to the Capitol. Essentially, there'll be a march for all the attendees doing that. So in that, yes, we will be. But for some people, if people can't make it to the church, that's okay. They can show up at the rally at any point in the day that they can. But for those able to come meet in the church in the morning, we'll be marching to the Capitol.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Of course. And Robin, I see your question in the chat. Yes, I will make sure that everybody has access to these slides. We'll send those out. We'll also send out most of the information in here is on our legislative advocacy toolkit. And I am going to post the link in the chat so that y'all have it right now. And then we'll also be sending that out in our follow-up email to this call. let's see. David?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, two questions. In the march, can we march by the governor's mansion? That's number one. And number two, does HB 1556 raise the age from 18 to 21?
I believe.
It 1556, yes, ranges the age from 18 to 21. It's very much like the same bill last session that the Uvalde families pushed for, which we in our coalition pushed for with them. Raise to 18 to 21 to purchase semi-automatic rifles. And then the march route, I just don't have that right now, David. So I can't answer that part of your question.
Because it would be nice to give Governor Abutt a message while we're there. I mean,
I hear you.
it would be inspiring.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Does anyone else have a question? Again, I'm gonna get that Advocacy Day link for you here in 1 second, and we will have the slides and the advocacy toolkit in our follow-up emails to make sure that y'all have that.
Garrett, Robin asked about a training package or something that we'd be offering. Did you mention something like that? Or she wasn't able to use her voice, so she's putting it in the chat. But
Let's
do you
see.
know what that is?
Training package.
Maybe maybe you were saying the drop-offs for the offices? Do you think that's what?
That might be it, yeah. Let's see. So we'll have we'll have one pages that we're getting together with the Texas Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. We'll have those for everybody that if you want to stop by your legislators or any legislators' offices that day to drop those by. We will also have our legislative advocacy toolkit, which does have I'm happy actually I'm going to stop sharing this and I will pull over that and share my screen to show y'all for just a second. Right. Now I've lost Zoom. There we go. All right. So this is what our advocacy toolkit looks like. We will have this again in email and it's in the link in the chat. So a lot of the information that we just went over, I pulled from this document. Most of this is the same. I'm going to scroll down a little bit further. So this has some scripts for beyond Advocacy Day for if you're opposing or supporting certain gun bills to email your legislator, to have a phone call with your legislator. And also if you want to post on social media about any specific bills. We've also got links in here for how to sign up to support or oppose a bill. Some tips on preparing notes and introducing yourself and establishing a personal connection. And then, of course, we've got the talking points that I mentioned in here as well. Gun violence terminology, and a few more things, including, I don't want to speak too soon. Nicole, is Bill Tracker live?
It will be very, very soon. And if everybody's following our newsletter, we should be sharing it there. Like probably could be next week, very soon.
Perfect. David, is that hand from before?
No, I have another question. Sorry.
Yeah, of course. No, you're good.
So I just want to clarify. Texas Gun Sense will be putting us in groups to meet with our respective legislators. For example, State Senator Molly Cook is my state senator, so I will be meeting with her. Is that how this is going to work?
So I think Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you'll definitely have the opportunity to meet with your specific legislator. I think that people will be going to multiple offices if they're interested. Is that right?
I think it becomes very difficult to make sure that everybody in the groups are going to their lawmaker's office. So what we're telling people is if for some reason you're put in a group where you're not going to your own lawmaker's office, you are highly encouraged to drop by there while you're in the building to your own representatives and senators. And groups aren't put together yet. They will be put together. And when you get to Advocacy Day, after the rally and we go into the Capitol and we grab our lunches, there will be a way where everyone's going to be matched up with their group, and it'll somehow all fall into place. It did last time, and you'll be with, an assigned leader and a group of people, and you'll know where you're going.
Okay. But the idea is that we're going to be meeting with our own legislators. Is that
If you are in a group that is not going to your own legislator, then once you're done with that meeting, with those meetings or one pager drop offs, you are highly encouraged to go to your own lawmakers' offices and just drop in and say, I'm a constituent and I'm here. And I wanted to talk to you for a few minutes. Yeah.
Heidi, I see your hands up.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Here's my question. Well, twofold. One is my state senator and my state rep, I know very well, and I know that they are all on board. Do I still need to meet with them and waste their time? I mean, I know they would support anything Texas Gun Sense does. So do you need me to go in a group with somebody else to another? Except other state reps won't care about me because I can't vote for them. So I'm trying to figure out my role here.
Right. So I think it's always valuable to drop off one pagers, to send emails, to give calls to your legislator to make sure that you're giving them specific bills if they haven't signed on or expressed full support for those specific bills that you're supporting, or expressed opposition against those bills. Definitely would still suggest that with your specific legislators. From advocacy days that I've been to for gun violence and for other issues, I found that it's still valuable to meet with those legislators, because you're absolutely right that if you can't vote for them, a lot of them will dismiss that alone and say that you're not a constituent, so we're not going to listen to your input. The decisions that they make still affect all of us across the state, and advocating for people, if you know folks in their community, or just advocating for people in the Lone Star State overall, is something that I think will connect to a lot of the legislators, not all of them, but it's definitely showing up in mass and showing that a strong base from Texas supports these gun violence prevention efforts does make an impact, no matter how small or large.
I think Garrett's right. Heidi, good to see you. And I'll just add, if you ever hear, Vicki Goodwin is like one of our biggest advocates. And, we hear her every time I've been with her at an event, I hear her say, I love to look out at the crowd. She's usually talking about hearings, but in committee rooms, I love to look out and see the faces of our, Texas Gun Sense and Moms Demand Action and supporters and people. And so it's still just to let them know, like, I'm popping in to let you know I was, here, and thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for supporting gun safety. It makes them feel good. So I don't think it's ever wasted. And with the harder
to pop
Sorry?
in, do we need to make an appointment to pop in?
No, we'll make appointments for every group of volunteers, for every lawmaker's office. And if you end up not in a group for whoever your rep is and you wanted to go pop in and say hi, you should. Yeah, Donna Howard. Yeah, she's mine too. So if you're not in Donna Howard's group, that's okay. Just pop in to see her while you're there and tell her thanks for everything she does for safe storage, which she has. And then The other thing I was going to say was for the really hard legislators, we're going to be very strategic about who's going to those offices based on our volunteer makeup and whether they're survivors, constituents, others. And so we're going to really work hard on like key committee members, for example, and stuff like that. So we'll do the thinking around those things, and you should be in a pretty appropriate group as well as we're able to make it happen.
So
Yeah.
one more question for this HB 1556, which is at the top of your list, and last year was a big deal. It will be a big deal again this year. Well, I'm assuming there will be a hearing, and we will need to show up for the hearing, be part of the crowd, or sign in yay or nay, or something like that.
If there's another hearing on that bill, you guys will hear from us, and we will be letting you know, there'll be action alerts from us and other orgs, and we'll be trying to get all of you there.
Do you
But
think there's a chance there won't be a hearing on that one?
I do think there's a chance there won't be a hearing on that, and I'm just being practical minded about it. So if there's not, we're going to be continuing to make it a very visible issue no matter what.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions?
Not a question. I was actually trying to raise my hand, but the icon wasn't coming up for me. Just relative to the commentary around popping into your legislators' offices, if you know they're on board, right, and they're positive. I know they're going into a leg session where they're fighting an uphill battle again. I know my local legislators have said there's a lot of down feelings, right? So the more we can be there to show up and support them and say, keep fighting the good fight, just like we are, just pop in, put your name on the log, tell them you were there, tell them thank you, and that you support them just like they're supporting us.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're people too, and definitely it's not pleasant having to go in there every day and fight for the issues that we're fighting for. So I definitely think it's always uplifting, as Nicole mentioned with Vicky Goodwin, to see people in the crowd and to know that your allies are there and have your back. David?
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, I just want to make the point that the Republicans are not just foot dragging on these gun legislation. I mean, they have an active conspiracy, behind the doors, closed doors conspiracy to stifle anything. I mean, I saw that last 2 years ago, where they kept the poor Uvalde parents after having their kids' heads blown off, kept them sitting around all day until midnight, when they finally agreed to hear one of the common sense bills. So, I mean, it's just disgusting to me. And is there some strategy that we can employ to try to counteract that?
Jared, I'm guessing you want me to weigh in. It's a hard one, right? Like this is what we talk about in every coalition meeting with our partners, which is how we're gonna hearing or not, action or not, we have to be prepared for that, and to keep, our intentions are to keep the press on the issue all session long and beyond, and to keep the focus on it, whether there's a hearing or not. And honestly, Advocacy Day is a big part of that. So you all coming and getting people to come is a huge piece of drawing that attention during session to say we haven't forgotten and it's inexcusable and all of that. So I would just encourage you to get as many people as you can to the Capitol.
All right, y'all. So I'm going to put my email in the chat. If I can spell, there we go. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Again, we'll be reaching out in the next couple days with this recording link, as well as the legislative advocacy toolkit that we've rolled out. And make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter on our website. It is going to be getting an update hopefully next week or soon after with our bill tracker, and just kind of seeing where your legislators stand, what their scores are on gun violence prevention measures. And our website will have all the resources you need to follow bills we're tracking, and our efforts and ways that you can get involved. Thank you all for joining this call. Thank you for signing up for Advocacy Day and working to make our state safer. And we will hopefully see you on February 27th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you,
y'all.
Garrett.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.